I think if a person, whether you're male or female, if you go into the service, your life is going to be a lot different, and I think for the better.
Virtually every veteran that I talk to says the same thing. My time in service was invaluable. I am who I am today because of what I went through back then.
When you're 20 years old, you can do about anything. 68 years ago, I enlisted in the Army on my 20th birthday. And because you had to be 21 to get in the Army, I had to have my dad's consent. And I went to where he worked and I gave him the thing to sign. And I'll never forget what he said, because he was a World War I veteran. He says, "Well, I know if I don't sign this, you'll do something else crazy."
I was really excited when I spoke with my recruiter, because he gave me a list of things. I'd showed him, I was 27 when I went in, so he showed me a list of experiences that I could possibly consider. And I just went down the line until I found a clinical nurse, and I knew right away that that's what I wanted to do, because I had taken a lot of interest in nursing before that time.
I always wanted to go in the service, and I thought I'll go in the Army because my dad was in World War II. And I hid all the brochures under the mattress, between the mattress and box springs. And my sister knew it. She was the only one my brother didn't even know. And I actually took the test and knew when I was going in the service. I sat my mom and dad down and said, on September 28th, which was a month later, I said, I'm joining the United States Army.
My dad was in the Navy. My mom's brother was in the Seabees. No one else in my family served. None of the boys, none of the cousins, no one.
My reason for joining the Navy, I was married in college, and my young husband went into the Army, and he became an officer, and he was in the European theater, and he was killed. So I was teaching school at the time, and after he was killed, after my school year was over, I joined the Waves.
And I went in on the Waves' 10th anniversary, it'll be July 30th, 1952. And I got out in 1956, and then I joined the reserves. And I stayed until 1960, and I ended up with a rank of Yeoman Second Class.
I was a teacher. I enjoyed teaching, but the Army was looking for women college graduates to commission in the Women's Army Corps. So I thought, well, 2 years is such a short time, so I joined. I decided to go regular Army, which committed me to 20 years. And then after the 20, I still wasn't ready to retire, so I stayed 6 more years.
I applied for a job as a telephone operator, and they said, no, you're left-handed, and it wouldn't coincide with the people that when they write out, those days they wrote out toll tickets for long-distance calls. So I said, okay, the next best thing is to join the military. So I joined the Navy, and guess what? After boot camp, the first place they put me is a switchboard operator.
And I didn't know what I was going to get into, but I decided that since there were only 5 girls in our family, we didn't have any boys, that I was going to be the boy in the family and go into service. And I did that.
My training was conducted at Fort McClellan, Alabama. It had to be the wettest place there ever was.
And I go to Cincinnati, Ohio, and I get on change trains, and I go to New York City. So we had to get on the subway, and they gave you all the instructions. And I found myself dropped off with these suitcases and the high-heel shoes that they said not to wear. And they dropped me off out in the boondocks, and there was someone there that met me and said, fall in, Seaman, you're in the Navy now.
I'm a retired Lieutenant Colonel, Army Nurse Corps. I served for 26 years in the Army Active Duty and Reserve.
I served in the military, the Women's Army Corps, which calls the WACs, from 1943 to 45. And I served in the European theater. And I was a driver for a postal battalion in England. and the personal driver of a major, and I was eligible to drive up to a 2.5-ton truck.
All of us had to have two specialties, and mine were personnel management and personnel administration. I was a WAC company commander twice in Heidelberg, Germany, and in Fort Sam Houston, San Antonio, Texas.
I was a WAC. I was in from September of '69 till November of '78. My last assignment was a drill sergeant, and I decided to get out at that time and use my GI Bill and get my degree.
I was in the U.S. Air Force from October of '69 to October of 1973, and I got out. I was a sergeant. I was in SEC headquarters in Omaha, Nebraska, and then I went to Clark Air Base in the Philippines, and I got sent back early because the POWs were coming home from Vietnam.
I served during 43 to 45 in the Air Force. I was under the Army then, and I worked in a Kearney Air Base in the hospital at Kearney, Nebraska. They had a big runway so they could bring the hospital boys back from the different branches of service. I was actually a patient there at the hospital. I was there for 3 days, and then darned if they didn't put me in there as a ward help.
I went with a billeting officer once, and I had to take the officer around. He knocked on the door and said, "Here, you're going to have to take an American soldier." And they had to take American soldiers in their homes, whether they liked it or not.
In Heidelberg, I was the only WAC officer with all of the enlisted women who were assigned to the 130th Station Hospital. So I was it for the women.
I was at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, at Brooks Army Medical Center. We had urology, neurology, we had orthopedics, we had oncology. I learned to be a very good phlebotomist during that time as well, which is drawing blood.
I did really good in school, and they didn't have very many female instructors at the drill sergeant school. So I had to serve 6 months, but I served a year because I was having kind of good time with the kids.
We were the only ones that had computers. So the people from England came over to view, to go through our department. We had a lot of people come through our department because it was all new.
We had a lot of military protocol where we had to wear our dress uniforms for marching or special celebrations on the base and things. I loved that, the pomp and majesty of it all.
Because we were all drivers, we had to keep our Jeeps clean, that you could do a white glove inspection on a motor, if you can imagine that.
I was stationed up in Newport, Rhode Island for 21 months. Then I requested overseas duty, and I requested England, France, and Hawaii. Well, of course, they never give you what you want. So they gave me the third choice, which was Hawaii. But oh my goodness, what a wonderful place to be.
The boys was brought back from both fronts, and then they were treated there overnight and ate, showered, whatever, and then sent to their own closer home at the hospitals. I remember one man, he come in, he had both legs off.
We were busy. It was a difficult time. Our job was difficult, but every nurse that I know and every nurse that I worked with rose to the occasion and gave 100%.
Give her a nice hat with feathers, a jacket and a dress of blue.
I ended up having the ambulance pick me up at the station where I got off and went into the hospital. They didn't have facilities for women at that time, so they just had one room off of each ward so they could have officers, because they never was with the non-coms. And they went and told this lieutenant that he'd have to go back to the barracks because he is ready to rehab. So he had to give it up to a woman.
Women were very limited in their assignments. I was fortunate in terms of, in those days, of course, they didn't have that many slots available for female officers overseas, but even so, I still was able to spend 2.5 years in Heidelberg, Germany, and almost 2 years in Okinawa.
At that time, no, the women were not allowed on ships.
You know, at that time we were segregated.
And we weren't allowed to bear arms. And we were never right up in the front. We were always behind the front. And the difference between the service now and then, when I was in, the blacks were separated from the whites. And then we had separate quarters, and now it's all one, which I think is great.
You know, during World War II, you had to wear a uniform all the time. You couldn't go out in civilian clothes.
We wore, I don't know how to describe it. They were a PT uniform, basically a skirt, had all these pleats in it and a blouse. And then we had these shorts that had pleats in them to wear when we did our exercising.
I do remember at the academy, after I had taken all the courses that I could take, I wanted to teach. And they said, well, there are no women who teach at the academy. And they said, especially no nurses. And I just went, okay, I don't like that. So I kept applying, and I got hired. I was the first female instructor at the Academy of Health Sciences. And when I quit teaching at the academy, fully a third of the instructors were women.
And you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, or the times they are a-changing.
By the time I became a drill sergeant, they were throwing grenades. They had to qualify with the rifle.
The women could stay in if they were pregnant and had babies, which hadn't happened before.
They said, finally we can stay in and get married, we can have children, and that should be the way it is. That's the way it is in the outside world. Why not, you know? I think with us being able to train with male drill sergeants and them seeing how good we were also training troops, I think that helped a lot to change the mindset.
You got to do the work. And if you do the work, I think it's like anything. I don't think it matters whether it's civilian or military. You do the work, you will get respect from your peers and cooperation.
He proudly wears the colors.
We knew that when a woman went into the office, that man was going overseas. You know, that we replaced that man. I replaced someone when I went into that computer department.
They said we took over their jobs, so they had to go to sea or they had to go to war on the front lines, you know. But it wasn't that way at all, because chances are they probably wouldn't have had that job anyway, you know, because a lot of them they had seagoing jobs like a bosun's mate, you know. So I didn't have a whole lot of problems though.
Most of them were pretty cooperative. I was a teacher, and they had to listen to me whether they were a superhero, a sergeant, or a lieutenant, or a major, or whatever they happened to be.
I don't have the same complaints that a lot of the women had.
The officers and the doctors were all nice and whatever. I can't say that I was mistreated or anything.
I didn't have any problems. You know, nobody mocked me, nobody bullied me, nobody did anything. I just stayed very focused on what my responsibilities were to the military.
It was fine, actually. All the people my age, late teens, early 20s, we all got along. That was not a problem. The officers were generally younger officers, you know, lieutenants, second lieutenants, captains, and they were, again, very accepting.
We're in a different generation. My generation, we more or less kept quiet. This generation, the women are going to speak out and let the men know exactly how they feel, how the people feel. So it all has changed in time. And I think that really today the women get more respect than we did, because we sure didn't.
The biggest problem we had is that when we went ashore to go on Liberty for the evening or something, and we'd catch a bus and ride it to town, and all these sailors were fine going in, but coming back they all had too much to drink, and they said some pretty nasty things to us. But somehow you just kind of gritted your teeth and, you know, went on.
It's the older enlisted people, the master sergeants, the senior master sergeants, that were actually working with me or had to train me for certain things, that had a little problem with it. They dealt with it, and they didn't ever make me feel bad, but I knew that they would have preferred I be a guy.
You didn't have the recourse that you have today. I think that could have been and was the hardest thing for a lot of women who didn't know how to handle unwanted advances from men. But I was used to it. I knew how to handle them.
I would go into a ward or something, I'd say, "Where are you guys from?" And Ewan's is Pennsylvania. And they'd holler, oh, they knew where I was from. And that's when I was in Nebraska. But this fellow says, "I'm so glad I hear Pennsylvania," because he was there. And you know, I met him a year later in a veterans hospital in Aspinwall, Pennsylvania. And they had him in one of them beds that you turn over. And he hollered clear across the ward at me.
The GIs always treated us great. I mean, I never came across any in either England or Paris that, you know, that they didn't respect us, and it you just became like family.
I met a lot of great friends that I still correspond with. It was just a part of my life. When I got out, I finished my college, I went on and got my master's, and life goes on. But it started there. It started with the military.
I'm very patriotic. I love my country. I'm glad that I could participate when I did.
That was the proudest day of my life when I put that uniform on.
It was great duty. It was wonderful. I loved it.
I knelt down beside one soldier and talked to him and you know, just tried to calm him down, and because they didn't have rooms yet for him. So we all did that, and I became acquainted with two of them. And the one that I met first, he was going to be sent home, and he said he hated to leave Paris without seeing it. So I got permission from my commanding officer to take him around Paris in the Jeep. So 2 whacks in the back and me driving, and this fella. That to me was the best thing I ever did in the service, was to see that he got to see Paris before he went home.
Everything that I've done has made me the person I am today.
I thought that I did such a great thing when I was in, and compared to what they're doing now, it's kind of small in comparison. I mean, I felt that my job was important, but there are so many other things that have been added to the Army and the Navy.
My greatest achievement, I was just a nurse doing her job, just an instructor, trying to be the best teacher I could be. I felt proud every day I put on that uniform.
And I'm still active. I'm in the color guard for the funerals, military funerals. I suppose I've done about 600.
The military has been very good to take care of me since I've gotten out.
It turned out to be a great career for me. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed all the travel. I enjoyed meeting all the people, having a different job, although in the same field. Wherever I went, I was most fortunate.
I always told anybody that's where they should go. And I had my sons go in the service. I had one boy in the Marines and the other in the Army.
Going in the service, I was very, very shy, introverted, and by the time I went through drill sergeant school, I was very extroverted. So it's probably the best thing that ever happened to me, because nothing really bothers me now. It was a great experience. I wouldn't trade the 9 years I had in the Army for anything.
Other than my 4 children, that was the greatest time I ever had. I loved it. I would go back today, but they don't take broken down machinery.
It's something I'll never forget, never.